Very excited today to have, Professor Dr. Peter Gruss, with us. Many of you know, Dr. Gruss as the president and CEO of OIST, the Okinawa Institute for Science and Technology. And, when, Peter and I were talking, originally we thought we wanted to give an update on what is going on at OIST, which is one of the great science schools in the world. But Peter said, you've heard this so many times, let's talk about something more exciting. Peter is also, in his research, one of the world's best experts in healthcare and actually the future of healthcare. And we all read a lot about technology, about AI, about the progress that we've got in the various fields of science. What actually is the impact on the healthcare world? Is it disruptive? Is it positive? What are the trends that we need to watch out for? There's no one better to explain it to us than Peter, and I want to give you the floor. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jesper, for the exaggerations. I am very happy to be here, and indeed I'm coming out of the molecular genetic part, but healthcare I had to study. So, but nevertheless, he's very right in that I was happy to organize the discussions on OIST and in the past. But today I thought, what should scientists do? Science and science in general terms, universities, they are being financed by the governments in order to prepare our societies for future challenges. And what could be better to bring to your attention one of the biggest future challenges in my mind, and that is the human health. And that's why I selected the topic today, the future of healthcare, biomedical research revolution and its positive disruption on existing practices. That means, of course, that there have been revolutionary technologies that were developed in the past 50 years or so. And it is based on these technologies that we can think about a healthy future in completely different terms. And I like to give you an overview, not too specific, but an overview over some of these technologies, in particular also what are the drivers of these technologies. And if I look at my first real slide, biomedical research or biomedicine is a major engine for both medical progress and economic growth. And the key challenges are overpopulation and long life. The world population growth here is, as you can see in the red line, shows you the annual growth rate of the world population. And you can see it's going down. So consequently, we are leveling off in terms of total number of people around the globe, but we are leveling off at a very high level. Because you can see that the prediction is that in 2100, we will have 11.2 billion people on that globe. So we need to discuss not just health, we need to discuss food, we need to discuss mega cities, we need to discuss where should they live and what happens with the rising sea level. So the one thing that may surprise you, you can see on that slide, and I got that from a colleague of mine from the Max Planck Institute for Demography, and you can see that the life expectancy revolution shows it's going up and up and up linearly. So in a very recent paper that was confirmed, here this finding was this paper strongly suggests that longevity is continuing to increase over time, and the limit, if, in brackets, there is any, has not been reached. A very famous physicist decades ago has already made that point here. There's nothing in biology yet found that indicates the inevitability of death. Well, that in itself is a revolutionary thought. Now look at what this is. This is the prediction of the demographers, and you can see this is the oldest age expected when 50% of a cohort is still alive. Look at the people born in 2010. You can see, you predict that in Japan, the average age is 107. So having said that, this all shows life expectancy goes up, longevity goes up, but unfortunately, it doesn't go up without consequences. That is just, to show you there's no way, no current indication that it should be reduced. So for 160 years, best performance life expectancy has steadily increased by a quarter of a year per year. Japan is the world record holder, looking at 65 plus. So 26.6% are already now above 26.6% are above 65. You see the green area here, and this green area will actually be bigger year after year. If you add to this the children up to 14, you can see that at the end of the day, less than half of the population has to support more than half in terms of getting a sustainable life. Now, as I said, aging is unfortunately not without consequences. Aging-associated diseases include atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease, arthritis, cataracts, osteoporosis, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, Alzheimer's disease, and, very important, cancer. The incidence of all these diseases increases rapidly with aging. And look at this number. Of the roughly 150,000 people who die each day across the globe, in industrialized nations, 90% die of age-related causes. That is why we have also a huge economic impact. And you can see here what the cost of healthcare is around the globe. Currently, 2020, $8.7 trillion is spent on that. And you can see that nearly half of these expenditures will go towards the treatment of 3 leading causes of death, all related to high age: cardiovascular, cancer, and respiratory diseases. There's a very recent paper actually came out this year, and this is from an aging researcher specialist in aging, David Sinclair in Harvard, and he says, we show that a slowdown in aging that increases life expectancy by 1 year is worth $38 trillion, and by 10 years, it's $367 trillion. So I might say we have no alternative. Looking at the increase of old people, We need to know more and study better and see that we find ways to treat aging-related diseases in order to get to a phase that is healthy aging. How can we then achieve healthy aging? And I've here a couple of points. I begin with better science leads to better health. I think this is trivial, but it's true nevertheless. So let's first see what is aging. Aging results from the impact of the accumulation of a wide variety of molecular and cellular damage over time. So let's just say there is not a switch, and I come back to this. There's not a single gene. There's not a single trigger that all of a sudden our clock has only, let's say, 12 more hours on it. No. It's a very complex situation, and that situation I will explain again in a few more minutes. However, we also know aging is in part genetically determined. You all may know families where the people generally grow older. So there is a certain degree of genetic involved. Aging takes place at all levels in our body, at the cell level, at the organ level, and of course at the organismic level. However, some simple animals are literally immortal. Take a look here. The jellyfish at the end here is immortal. A jellyfish does not die. Jellyfish can go from polyp to medusa. Some cells may die, they sink to the floor, form a new jellyfish. You can cut off parts of the jellyfish regenerates completely. Jellyfish literally is immortal. So what am I saying? There are biological principles that overcome aging and are allowing the full regeneration of an entire organism, as simple as it may be. Look at the others. In more general terms, the smaller the animal, the shorter the lifespan. But I gave you some of the heroes here, some of the longest living mammals, maximum span. You can see elephant, 70 years, Galapagos tortoise, 152, sea urchin, red sea urchin. Who would have thought? I was surprised, but 200 years for the Red Sea urchin. But look at the koi fish. The koi fish you find here, probably in the lake, it's 40 years. But there was a star called Hanako. Hanako apparently grew up to 226 years. The normal bowhead whale, 200 years. How about humans? Well, this is the record holder. Jean Calment, 122 years so far. Record holder in the south of France. You know, there are good red wines. Red wine has a substance in it called resveratrol. And resveratrol links into a biochemical pathway that is involved in extending age. Don't drink too much, but you know, a glass per day probably helped Calment very much. So now it's a key for our research and for looking forward. There is a lot of interspecies similarity that will be relevant to determine strategies as to how humans can age in a healthy way. One of the earliest model systems that was accessible also to molecular genetic interference is the worm called C. elegans. Now, C. elegans, one could interfere with by changing the gene expression pattern and making mutants in it. One could interfere with insulin pathways and insulin-related growth factors. And lo and behold, C. elegans could grow 10 times longer than the normal C. elegans. There's another animal that does that naturally. Look at that cutie here. That cutie is a naked mole rat. A naked mole rat has about a size like a mole, and you can see similar sized animals. Mice live about 4 years, rats live about 2 to 3 years, but naked mole rats live 30 years. So in analogy to the C. elegans, this means 10 times longer than related species would mean for humans, I showed you the table, 100 times 10 is 1,000 years. Now that is a perspective that should make us think. And why can that happen? Well, naked mole rats have very active repair mechanisms and a high level of what we call chaperones. Chaperones are proteins that help other proteins to fold properly so that the proteins that are being made in the cell are getting into the right shape. They rarely get cancer. So going back to what determines then aging? Well, I already indicated genetics, and according to Jim Vopel, about 25%. Childhood has some impact. You know that there have been statistics that clearly show if you have obese children, that obesity in adulthood is very likely. So childhood has an effect, but the most prominent effect is adult life. So very clearly, it is what you do or not do during adult life that determines the ultimate age. Now it gets a bit more, scientific, and all you need to see is on the right side there is like a swing. You have on top genetic risk factors and environmental factors. They are constantly acting on us. Now, then there is a balance, as you can see, between damage and repair. If you have a repair mechanism that is equal to the damage, you're fine. You'll grow forever. If, however, the damage goes down, then you have what's here on the bottom, and that means you have programmed cell death called apoptosis. Senescence means cells don't divide anymore. And at the same time, with the increase of damage, and that's why it's on that slide, you have an increase of cancer. Because cancer, in essence, is an accumulation of mutations, and these mutations are giving the cancerous tissue an advantage to grow. That is the key. And escape the immune system. Now, this is a bit very scientific on the left, but what it shows, and this is very recent publication, it shows that there have been studies that looked at people's genome using large-scale analyses in order to study if the aged patients or the aged clients have a different composition of mutations or gene alleles, as we say, compared to the not so old people or people that died early. And clearly, there is a correlation, and that was possible to determine with the novel tools, which is genomic analysis and AI. And I'm coming to this now. But taking together There are 9 hallmarks of aging. So remember at the beginning, I was indicating that there's not just one switch. There are 9 areas. And there's too much time. I would need to go through all of it. But let's go to genome instability. Genome instability means the mutations that you get throughout your life by eating the wrong thing, eating, drinking too much alcohol, having too much sun, they will interfere with actually the DNA sequence, and hence they will change particular bases in the DNA, cause mutations, and these mutations, if not repaired, can have an effect. Why? Because I come to this also in a while, our body is full with stem cells that regenerate what we have here. So genomic instability. Then telomere activation. See, every one of us has 23 chromosomes, and these chromosomes are linear. They are not circles. So if you replicate them during the life cycle, you always lose at the end of the chromosomes. You lose a few nucleotides, which limits the replication number to 20 plus. So every stem cell can replicate about 20 times until it reaches a finally differentiated cells, and then the telomere is too short to allow another replication. However, scientists now know there are enzymes like telomerase that can replenish the end of that can replenish telomeres at the end of the chromosome. Then what's called here in green, epigenetic alterations. So we constantly are in contact with our environment, and this interaction is finding a place on our DNA. So that genes are, through our environmental interaction, being activated or inactivated. Again, this is the 65% of our life. So this may suffice for the time being, but it shows you that there are 9 hallmarks of aging. And that's the dream, of course. If we now know there are 9 hallmarks of aging, we want to get the fountain of youth, den Jungbrunnen. This is an oil painting on lime wood from Lukas Kranach. It's in Berlin. It shows a fountain where older women, but not men, bathe, are rejuvenated and finally indulge in music, dance, and good food. I don't know why not men, but bottom line is that we are probably dispensable. Kranach presents in many details the real bathing culture of the Middle Ages that was based on the belief that certain baths may heal and rejuvenate. And if I go back to the 9 hallmarks of aging, literally these are 9 targets for therapeutic interventions. And there is no newspaper, no daily news, no newspaper, there is no advertisement on a daily basis that doesn't promise you a healthy life. And you can be assured that any of these fits in one of the 9 hallmarks. So if one would do this systematically, it would make sense, and that's what's missing at this point of time. So, science, better health, yes, but that's not all. Now, we need precision medicine, clinical diagnosis, health monitoring, and as a tool, ever since about 5 years, machine learning, which is a subdiscipline of AI that can transform these broad areas of biomedicine. Now, going back, and I took particularly this old slide, which is from 2001, because it shows you that if you take drugs, medicine, one size does not fit all. So we have to say goodbye for getting blockbusters, unless it's a COVID vaccine, of course. But if you look at antidepressants, for 38% of the people, it's ineffective. You look at asthma drugs, 40% don't respond. Diabetes drugs, 43%. Arthritis, Alzheimer. Well, Alzheimer at that time, no surprise, because there's nothing serious. So cannot really work. Cancer drugs, same thing. So this tells you that we were in 2001 largely ignorant about the molecular natures of many of the diseases. And that's where precision medicine comes in. A patient's genetic information and drug response data can be used by physicians to create personalized treatment. And one of the major tools is the genome analysis. And you can see in green the cost of the genome analysis per genome. In white on the top, it's Moore's law. And the cost of genome sequencing has rapidly fallen over the past decade, making genome-based personalized treatments a feasible option for many. So we are talking about a cost that is at least under $1,000. Innovative companies combine genetic testing with AI to analyze the data and compare results from patients worldwide. This is very important. Have large-scale data analysis to help physicians diagnose and treat disease. This is one of the founding fathers of what we call systems biology or systems medicine, Leroy Hood. Leroy Hood has propagated what he called the P4 medicine. Personalized, so customized diagnosis and treatment, predictive, profile-based prediction of disease and therapy, preventive, prevention and early diagnosis instead of disease curation, participatory, empowerment and involvement of patients, very important. So what will this bring to medicine? It will bring the shift from therapy to prediction and prevention. And it will, of course, be potentially much easier in clinical trials. Why? Because you can profile the patients based on their genome. In other words, the large numbers you need currently for clinical trials can be reduced to maybe about 10–20% to literally only take the group that is amenable to this particular treatment. Now, Craig Venter is the one who actually speeded up the human genome sequencing considerably with his original company. And he's very outspoken. So you can see here, this is his statement. He said, medicine has been a clinical science supported by data. It is about to become a data science supported by clinicians. And this is what I believe will happen, because a clinician will not make in the future a proper decision without being substantially supported by molecular data. Now let me tell you and show you the power of sequence analysis. Now in this paper, Craig has published the identification of individuals by trait prediction. So what that means, you have the sequence, the genomic sequence of individuals. And he looked at about 1,000 to 1,100 and made a prediction, in this case, about the face. So you can see these three individuals were purely predicted on the basis of the DNA sequence. He had no other information. And now I show you the photograph. This is the photograph of the particular individual. And that's what they could do because we build models to predict 3D facial structures, voice, biological age, height, weight, body mass index, eye color, skin color, and many more. So even just the primary sequence harbors a lot of information that in conjunction with large data sets and AI analytical tools can help you predict an enormous number of traits. It can definitely predict cases where you need to personalize medicine. This was one of the very first, I think it was the second drug that has ever been developed as a personalized drug. Trastuzumab, Herceptin was the name, and that drug is useful in female patients that have an overgrowth of a particular receptor on the surface of cells. So if you block this receptor, then these patients will have a longer lifespan. But there is a general aspect of improving clinical diagnosis. And look at this. Classifying brain tumors using AI, about 100 different types. Machine-based diagnosis was more accurate and specific than diagnosis made by pathologists. The lead author's name was Kappa. Kappa's approach complements, expands, and in some cases exceeds the possibilities of tumor diagnosis based on microscopic examination. And look just simply at the complexity of breast cancer. 3 to 8% of all women carry a mutation called BRCA1, BRCA2, and these women have a 50 to 80% chance of developing breast cancer during their lifespan. In total, cancer tumors show 30,000 different mutations in 7 main categories. And you need different treatments for each of the tumors. So you have to have a diagnosis first, and only then can you make an educated therapy or can develop an educated therapy. And here at the bottom, it is almost impossible for a single clinician to master this complexity. Hence, you have to have the support of the molecular diagnosis. This shows you some of the current developments in imaging. Researchers from Harvard and MIT showed with deep learning automatic discovery of metastatic breast cancer. You can see at the bottom heat maps of breast cancer. But what I was most impressed was at a visit in India, where I have seen a small company, Niramai, and this company has developed a heat map, a breast cancer screening based on commercially available infrared camera and AI-based cloud system. And lo and behold, this was more precise, had a higher resolution power, and could discern between malignant and benign tumors. So it was, in essence, easier, cheaper, and hence better tool compared to breast tomography, which is not easy for them. So much lower cost, earlier detection, lower barrier for patients. And what I'm saying here is, even for developing countries, there can be highly qualified, highly precise new diagnostic tools that can be developed. Look at all of us going out in the sun. So you want to have a differentiation between a normal mole and pre-cancer epidermal lesion. And this is now actually all over the market. You can do this by means of AI. AI, in more general terms, has a very high level of precision if you can work with images. That's a huge market. Robotic-assisted surgery. So here, together with imaging, you can have robots that are so much more precise in surgeries that need a high level of precision, be it spinal cord or brain, for example. And my absolute favorite is this one. This is a particular robotic, it's a particular type of surgery where you have it's called iKnife with an integrated mass spec. So let me just let me simplify it. What that knife does, it allows you to excise the tumor, but at the same time you excise, it has a protein analytical tool. So it tells you in a fraction of the second if you are within the tumor or outside of the tumor. And that's unbelievable what technologies can deliver if you combine, let's say, mechanical knife with a molecular tool. So the iKnife shortens the duration of cancer surgery by eliminating long waits, determines the boundary between cancers and healthy issues. One can call it in situ metabolomics. See what the eye cannot see due to the integrating surgical and analytical systems combined with intelligent data analytics. Health monitoring. This is something which I also have been very fond of. I'm sure you all remember the first X Prize. The first X Prize was given to Richard Branson for his Virgin kind of glider going in 2004. And ever since, X Prize was given in various fields. Now this one was a deep learning assisted diagnosis. And just look at the bottom. It allows you with these simple instruments to diagnose 34 health conditions at home or with a nurse with not a lot of complicated or expensive kinds of machines. Diabetes, atrial fibrillation, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, urinary tract infection, sleep apnea, leukosis, pertussis, stroke, tuberculosis, pneumonia. So this is the future where we do believe there will be a set of simple, intelligent devices that will allow us, while we age, to tell us exactly if things go wrong. And that we all know. I mean, I put one on here just to not run out of time, but I guess I'm
No, you're fine.
Wearable. So far, wearable technology has not made it into the clinic. But I can tell you, because I was talking to people in the United States, there is a strong push to combine wearables with clinics or nurses so that you have, if you increase the number of options to diagnose, let's say high blood pressure, that you get an immediate call from the clinic. There is a constant feedback loop that tells the patients or the doctor something went wrong. So this is something that will come, is not yet there, but I can be sure that this is going to be developed by the respective companies, and this will be a tool that everyone has in order to make sure that the basic health parameters are working well. Now this, of course, is what science has done for that. And every single point every single bullet point is a separate talk. So you will forgive me if I only take the red one, because the red one is, I believe, of special interest also here in Japan. Now, damaged tissue could be replaced by cell regeneration, which is necessary because there are not enough organ donors for all patients who need a transplantation. And if you look back in history, regeneration is nothing special, because we already know that Prometheus was bound to a rock by Zeus, who came as an eagle to eat his liver every day. Every day means the liver had to regenerate overnight so that Zeus could eat the liver the next day. And we know that liver is quite a regenerative organ. And I understand one of our ministers here has given, I think, to his father part of his liver. Minister Kono, I believe. So, you know, regenerative organ. Now, regeneration in the animal world is nothing special. You see here a salamander. This salamander, as you just saw, lost its leg. And in the course of 4 to 6 weeks, this salamander can regenerate the entire extremity. So there has to be a genetic program that triggers at the point of the cut the entire process that leads to the regeneration of this extremity. And that's what science is about to figure out. We are about to work with stem cells, and you can see here a variety of stem cells in the human bodies, in order to understand the molecular processes that push these stem cells in a particular direction of a terminally differentiated cell. You can do this with organoids. Organoids are small organs in tissue culture. You can either start with a stem cell, you can start with a skin cell and make a stem cell like Yamanaka has shown from a skin cell. But the bottom line is, you can already grow now small organs in tissue culture that can help you to understand certain defects. You can also take these cells from patients and see what happens if you repair the respective mutation in tissue culture. And I'll come back to this. And this is an experiment we did many years ago. This comes from my lab. But it was intended to have endogenous in the body of a mouse a trigger of a particular gene we discovered. And that gene here is called PAX4, that triggers the full development of an islet of Langerhans. And the islet of Langerhans, this big ball that you can see here, is producing insulin. So in general terms, what this research will do, it will either externally or internally be able to trigger differentiation of given cells into given organs in order to repair the defects that may have accumulated over a period of time or has been triggered by means of infectious diseases. And this is the latest tool that has received a Nobel Prize award last year. It's called CRISPR, and CRISPR allows you to change in every cell single mutants, single mutations, single defects. Now, if you go to the last point, that, of course, touches a very difficult area. It's the ethics of using CRISPR in the germline that is hotly debated. And the entire Western world doesn't think the technology is ready yet. There has been one medical doctor in China who has done that type of experiment and thankfully has been prosecuted because it is at that point not safe. But that doesn't mean it will not be safe forever, because somatic mutations, as you can see here, in 2016, the US approved a clinical trial involving a CRISPR-based immune therapy. So as we say in science, somatic cells, body cells, you can treat. So if you have a particular disease, you could treat the disease by utilizing CRISPR in order to change the genetic material in this group of cells and have, during your lifespan, no problems with this with a single shot. Theoretically, you can do this as well using the germline, but only theoretically. So here, I'm sure that given the next 10, 20 years, we will also discuss germline mutation or mutagenesis. But at this point of time, I think the scientific community is united in not approaching germline manipulation. So, the key takeaway: emergence of precision medicine driven by advances in systems biology, supported by a revolutionary technology, IT and AI. Conversions of patient data will create new ways of care delivery and paradigm change. A fully integrated digital healthcare ecosystem will be able to unlock the value of healthcare data and will create new business opportunities. A holistic systems approach is required to manage the future healthcare ecosystem, and it's very likely that integrated technology and service provision will become a central element of the future. And what I have not mentioned, the one thing that is a prerequisite for all of this is standardization. You know, you cannot use clinical data as they are currently. You have to standardize clinical data. You have to be able, and that's why initially, you know, one is better off in working with big clinics where they already have standardization. And I had just yesterday evening a nice talk with Cleveland Clinic in order to, you know, discuss a joint venue. But key is, for all data, be it molecular or be it clinical data, you need to standardize. Each country has to get its act together in order to do so. So with this, let me say thank you, but not without telling you what is the best way for healthy aging. Where do we go from here? That's the best way for healthy aging. So come to Okinawa's blue zone. Thank you.
Peter, absolutely fantastic, and thank you very much for, you know, particularly the last tip there. I thought you were going to say healthy aging in Okinawa's blue zone plus 1 glass of red wine every day. But you know, in all seriousness, you know, one area I wanted to quickly touch on. There is all this innovation, the science into technology, and the actual applications, the tools, the commercialization, you know, is ready. You mentioned the breast cancer detection system that was developed in India for a fraction of the cost of the mammography.
Right.
Yet, none of us has ever heard of this company. The diffusion of that company, even though it's better, faster, lower cost, it's absolutely nowhere. So what, in your mind, you know, is sort of preventing for the real progress that we have in the science, translating the science into something that is applicable, but it doesn't make it, right, into the actual healthcare system?
Right. Well, there are several reasons for it. Obviously, the market is dominated by companies who want to sell the big machines, computer tomography. No doubt about it. This thing costs, in total, less than $1,000 as equipment. But I also should be fair and say they are currently doing the large numbers of patient testing. So what they have to do is like anybody else. They have to provide and get the acceptance by the respective agencies. But I fully agree with you. I think this type of technology, no one, and I wouldn't have known it if I wasn't invited to go to a meeting in India. I wouldn't have known about it. But that was an eye-opener in several senses. It was an eye-opener that this technology is great everywhere, but it's particularly, say, sustainable in low-cost countries.
Right.
So you could even if the biggies of this world, the Siemenses, the Philips of this world, do not want to give up their CTs. This is something that you can bring in other countries. Yeah. So it's a business decision, Jesper. It's really in the hands of people who get to know the technology and take this technology and do something with us at a global scale.
I mean, enormous opportunities, obviously, a lot of fighting to actually do the disruption in the system, dealing with the insurance companies. But it's interesting because in this particular example, one of the worries is that you've got all this advanced healthcare and that it actually increases the gap in the sense that it will be available only to a select few who can afford it, while actually this example shows that in this particular case, it's actually a low-cost solution that actually democratizes, right, the potential positive impact very, very quickly. But you talked about $38 trillion. Now, the global economy is what, about $100 trillion. So if you basically disrupt $38 trillion, there's a lot of people who are going to get very angry and will fight against this, but that's a great opportunity. In the interest of time, I want to open the floor for any questions. Dozo, Ito-sensei.
Okay, Kohei Ito, Keio University. Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. I just wanted to make sure that I got your message correctly. I was very much interested in your one slide that shows 65% of your of the longevity depends on the way you live and the way you act every day.
Yes.
And probably this 65% is composed partly of sort of general wisdom, like don't drink too much and don't get too much sunshine, as you said. But also some of them should depend on your genome sequence you have. So were you suggesting that you should understand your genome sequence so that you can change the way you live?
Yes.
And that's a part of the 65%? Right. And if so, then if you actually look into this 25%, and of course you have this sort of strong desire to change whatever or correct whatever the fault or deficiency that you feel you have.
Right.
And then we get into this challenge with the ethic. Right. So what do you do with all these sort of dilemmas?
You understood it completely correctly. The bottom line is that you will have choices. And the monitoring I was indicating by various means may help you to make the right choices. Like this thing tells me when I'm sitting on my desk every hour I should get up. Every 2 or 3 hours it wants me to breathe. So, I'm wearing it only today, sorry. So you make the right choices. You read every day, you have to be physically more active. You should eat, you should have a diet that is normal. What is the purpose of all of this? Because, throughout our life, we are bombarded by means that harm our composition of either the DNA or the cell. And there are lots of repair mechanisms. But you could also, and now I'm looking from the science side, let's say, if the number of divisions is depleted, well, as I said, there will be ways to replenish the ends of the chromosome so that the clock can start anew. There will be ways that we see to repair better if we would be able to stimulate in people that do not have the genetic benefit of growing old, if we would be able to determine, and I showed you one slide where there are like 5 genes that are multi-trait, so these genes are involved in aging. If you would be able to trigger and stimulate those genes, your repair mechanisms will be much stronger. So what I'm saying is a holistic understanding will, even with an unhealthy way of life, will provide you with alternative routes, but we are not there yet. But that's why I was showing you also the 9 hallmarks of aging. And in every spot, you need to have, let's say, a diagnostic tool. You need to understand in the course of each individual's life, which of these is impacted the most and where should you interfere with it. But yes, you know, it is a way of how you live. But not everyone wants to give up lifestyle. You know, I like to have a glass of wine in the evening, even if you now read everywhere, alcohol in general terms is bad for you. Maybe that's why the Japanese government doesn't allow alcohol over dinner anymore. But then they will even get more old people. So.
Peter, I want to ask one follow-up question. You said that you know, sort of the whole healthcare system, and particularly the interaction between the patient and the physician, right? That, you know, it's going to become more and more data-driven,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
In your view, is the current education system up for this? I mean,
it's a perfect.
Are the future doctors being trained in the proper way?
Perfect question. I actually was thinking maybe I should bring in something about education. And the answer is no. Our current doctors are not educated to deal with all of this. They need to be competent in IT. They need to be competent to understand at least the background of the science behind it in order to make use of it. So the educational component has to change completely. You have to have access to a holistic data set. And, you know, in loose terms, it's actually referred to as digital twin. So anyone who will be born in the future will be accompanied by the digital twin where every single set of data can be stored and is available to treat the person more precisely. This, of course, comes with a tremendous need for cybersecurity. You don't want anybody to get this data. So that's why, you know, we need even greater effort to make sure that those data are secure. But this direction, so let's say you travel somewhere, all you do is either you have your code or you have your chip or whatever, and the doctor, wherever you are, plugs it in and knows exactly what the situation is like and how to treat your current ailment. That'll come. It's a matter of years. It's not if, it's when.
But this obviously, you know, sort of adds a layer of complexity. I mean, you've got, you know, multiple ethical questions.
Absolutely.
And then the whole,
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. My job is to prepare the people for the challenges of the future. This, to me, is one of the greatest challenges that will have to be met by humanity. It's human dignity. That's what it is at the end.
Nachi Das, I'm an investor and entrepreneur, Wall Street guy. So thank you very much for a fascinating talk. I'm particularly interested in the use of personalized data and research for preventative treatments before things get bad, before you have to resort to complicated treatments to address some of the issues. And if you look at ancient medicine, before the advent of clinical trials in the early 19th century, there was a lot of body of empirical knowledge which addressed holistic treatments, the same blue zone region that you alluded to, which talked about the importance of diet, predominantly 70% or 75% to address issues of aging. So while a lot of today's research has been focused on genetic research, genetic studies, and significantly, recently there's also been a lot of studies on microbiomes and the effect of the external genetic material in our bodies.
Yeah.
To what degree do you think the research has evolved so that our genetic material is mapped appropriately to the microbiome that we have, which really can't change that much. We get it all in the first year of our birth. So that the appropriate diet that is suitable for each person is most effective.
Right. I think you are 100% on track. We do, of course, we are a composite of multiple influences. The microbiome is an essential one and understudied. We need to understand the impact of the microbiome, not just for our daily digestion, but for health. And, you know, there are all these studies that we know. We also know, for example, if you give blood from a young mouse to an old mouse, the old mouse is much more agile, and you know, the physical composition of muscles and so forth change. And I'm sure with the microbiome it's the same thing. So I am quite interested in the impact of the microbiome on human health. And I just give you one example. That is, a couple of years ago, there was a paper coming out of the EMBL labs, and that showed that actually the diabetes type 2 respondent was in the microbiome. It was not a body cell. So my point is, we know much too little, wrongly so. We have to do more, and we are currently trying to get into this topic together with Hiroki Kitano, who is an adjunct professor at OIST, in order to study hopefully 10,000 microbiomes of Japanese people. And we want to compare this with 10K microbiomes of Israeli people, which is available. So I'm fully aware of it, but the depth of knowledge is much too low to make serious remarks, except, like I said, clearly there are some targets that we have underestimated that are actually directed at one component of the microbiome. And I'm 100% convinced that if you change microbiome, certain diseases will go away.
Mr. Takehito Kamata of Sophia University would like to hear your view as the OIST president. How could we train emerging researchers who will conduct more interdisciplinary research through the established traditional academic disciplines?
Well, we should train them by bringing to their attention during the MD study all the technologies that are required or could serve as a basis for better diagnostics and then for therapy. So if you go into medical education, you need to know what and how to get genomic, transcriptomic, proteomic, how to interpret epigenetic alterations. You need to know this. So they have to read these papers. Like I showed you only the very recent one. This is from actually last year, where they have 5 genes. But this is the beginning. So if, and I'm 100% convinced, if you do the epigenetic analyses with the genome, you will get a whole plethora of genes that you can associate with healthy aging. These data they have to understand. Why? Because at some point, they will get from the computer a data analysis, and they have to make the decision. So all I can say is that there needs to be an even better linkage between the basic science and the medical profession. So I would strongly suggest that, you know, what in some countries we have the MD, PhD, That's, of course, a great route, but that cannot be true for everybody. But we need to introduce into the curriculum of medical doctors let's say, the essentials of science that will help the doctor to diagnose and treat the diseases in the future.
Thanks very much. You've described a transition from sick care, which is our current approach, a therapeutic-based system, toward a healthcare approach. Okay? And my question here is on the economics of this. We have a sick care system because there are certain market failures and government failures. As the technology develops to allow healthcare to become possible, how do we overcome the rent-seeking, the big companies that you mentioned? How do we overcome the imperfect information, the asymmetric information? The doctor knows, the patient doesn't. That causes all kinds of trouble.
Absolutely.
How do we overcome that as we transition from the sick care system to a healthcare system?
Right. I think this is a perfect, valid question. And I have, of course, no perfect answer. All I can say is that it is, from my point of view, highly time that countries, governments, get together, have appropriate committees, because what you're talking about has a great impact on ethics. So we have, for example, in Germany, we have what's called an ethics committee, and they are currently addressing specific questions. Take, for example, germ-line stem cells and, manipulation. But what we need to do is, with this perspective, I think we need to start thinking about the transition to healthcare, which is a completely different ballgame regarding the informational content and the security and safety of this. And as you said, completely correct. Every, MRI analysis gives you zillions of data. The patient rarely sees the data. The doctor has the data. The doctor can keep it for comparison, which is not bad. But the patient has to be anonymous. So what we have to do, if you want to make most of the AI-driven molecular studies, you have to have the more data, the better. But these data have to be anonymized. Which again, if we look forward, having quantum computing, anonymity is relative. So we have a real problem here. And we need the society to bring together lawyers, social scientists. You need the geneticists. You need the clinicians. You need the general, health ministry. This needs to be done soon. If I could recommend something, this is what I would establish soon to project, let's say, stepwise process, because this will not happen tomorrow. It's a increase. It's progression. It's not a single step, because the tools are all here. But the tools have to be translated into clinical practice. And that's an issue that takes time. But yes, you're right. It's a serious issue.
Yeah, I like very much the transition from sick care to health care. From our friends overseas.
One more question from Mr. Joseph Meyer. So among the 9 targets for therapeutic interventions, where would you say Japan is? In terms of pharma, biotech companies, research university, is it most advanced?
You mean how I should judge the Japanese biotech company? Of course, you have a couple of biggies, Takeda. You have small companies. Some of them we are in touch with. I think, I'm maybe like Jesper, I'm a great friend of startups. And I do believe that the Japanese situation currently is improving. So my recommendation is that unlike Takeda, the startups will make differences. But you should also see that this is quite a shift in strategy, like what you said. See, the sick care was easy because you give drugs every month, let's just say.
One size fits all.
Consider what I've shown you. CRISPR-Cas. You change a bone marrow stem cells, and your immune system from then onwards is fine. Has been done in the United States. How much you charge? $1 million? So, it's a clear-cut improvement, but it changes the philosophy of charging. Obviously, the whole thing doesn't cost $1 million. No doubt about it. But at that point of time, they are a monopolist, let's just say. So another point for the, let's say, discussion of a big group in our societies.
Thank you. It's Tatsuo Kawasaki with Unison Capital. It's a rather simple question, but what's your prediction as to how long we might live as a human species? Can we beat the tortoise and Galapagos?
How we might live, this is a question I would like to know myself the answer to. It's really, this is an evening discussion over a glass of wine. Believe me, it's a very complex question. And I have some thoughts, but I don't think we have the time now because this impinges upon many things. Production, manufacturing, all automized. It'll change our society in a decade or two completely. Again, another issue that where the healthcare is only one element. So,
please, dozo.
One more quick question from Kohei Tokyo University. So Okinawa people live they are one of the longest longevity people among 47 prefectures. So what are their secrets? 25%, or is actually 65% so that we should all move to Okinawa?
I'm afraid to say that in the last 10 years, the average lifespan has gone down with the number of McDonald's going up. So it is like you say, but I would say it's in Okinawa, it's clearly lifestyle. But from my point of view, from the science point of view, of course, it's a good pool to do the genomics, and all you need is a drop of blood or saliva, and you can do the analyses. So my hope is that at some point we'll find a startup company that wants to do this with us in Okinawa, use the pool available and use the technologies that I have presented in order to get exactly the idea and the answer to your question, which otherwise I don't have.
Thank you very much. It's extremely interesting. You've got a lot of science that actually has evolved. It's not just in papers, it's not just in the ivory tower of universities, but it's leaking, it is being commercialized, it is starting to impact our life. And clearly the longevity is increasing. I think the Japanese government, many other governments, are setting quite ambitious targets for doing that. I just wish that the life extension, the longer life that we live, that it also is going to be a happier life. But that's a different discussion. Right. Peter, thank you very much.
Thank you.